What's up, YouTube? This is the Roman Atheist, your Romanist Atheist, and welcome to this week's video of YouTube, of Roman Atheist, Romanist Atheist, whatever we want to call it, whatever I call it, I don't know. Kind of out of the loop, out of the swing of things. Hope you guys enjoyed last week's video. This week I'm doing a response type video, which will be lots of fun. It is to a channel that goes by the What Would You Say? And it's like I don't even know how to explain it. It's like a partial animated picture video type thing about what would you say to topics Christians are involved in. They have videos on abortion. They have videos on surrogacy, which I'm responding to today. They have videos on atheism. They have a lot of videos on gay stuff, a lot of videos on trans stuff. You'll definitely be seeing them a lot in the next couple weeks, because oh my goodness, they are very frustrating. Like, wow. But we are going to get into this first video. This one is on surrogacy, and they're saying like surrogacy is bad or whatever. I'll roll the clip.
You're in a conversation and someone says, surrogacy is no different from adoption. So if you think it's wrong for a couple to pay a woman to carry and give birth to their child, you must think adoption is wrong too. What would you say?
So I feel like they're already kind of framing this question in a interesting way. They're just them comparing adoption and surrogacy as two sides of the same coin. Though they're going to argue against that a little bit, but even the way they're framing this, I think, is interesting, because the way they see it is very telling, in my opinion, because not only do they see, they're pointing things out in a way where not only do they say surrogacy is bad, which is where they're going with this, but they're going to argue that adoption is not a good thing either. Now I'll let them get into this, but where that becomes problematic is the genuine feelings and emotions of people do not line up with that information, and saying, oh, this is bad because it's bad, isn't a good reason. But just listen to the way that they're framing this question or this statement. If you think surrogacy is bad, you must also think adoption is bad. Even putting that parallel in there, they're going to point out in some ways that adoption is not a good thing. They'll probably, and this is my guess, it's been a while since I've watched this, say it is a necessary thing so a kid can have parents. But I don't think they're going to say it's a good thing. Something my guess will be, well, it takes the kid away from their biological parents, or then they're not connected with their biological parents, and that's a bad thing for some reason. And that's not true. Being biologically related to someone doesn't really matter in the long run. I've been told by people who have been adopted and that kind of things. I asked some people about this as some research. But anyway, I'll let them continue, and I'll refer to that some more, trust me.
Proponents of third-party reproduction, especially contract surrogacy, will often argue that it's just another form of adoption. But is that true? Before we answer, let's clarify what surrogacy is. Surrogacy is when an embryo is created in a lab and placed inside a woman who carries the baby and then transfers it to other adults who intend to raise the child.
So if you can't tell, they're being very deliberate in the way that they're speaking, or she's speaking in this instance. The way she's pointing it out and phrasing it is she's putting emphasis on lab and embryo and implanting in that statement, because she wants to draw attention to those words, because those are the ones where Christians will have an adverse reaction to. Because in many Christian circles, messing with the embryo and the conception of life goes like playing God or something, and that's an argument that is very commonly used. But her bringing emphasis to those words shows she's trying to play on Christian emotions towards that thing, which means she's setting out with a bias to begin with, and everyone does, but she's framing things in a way that creates a problem. But anyway, let's let her get into her actual argument.
In many cases, one or both of the intended parents are not biologically related to the child.
So here's again, I did say that she was going to go into not being biologically related to the child. Being biologically related to someone does not constitute whether or not they'll be good parents or whether or not the kid will be cared for and loved. Biological stuff is not important when raising a kid. Being biologically related to a child does not make a difference in the raising of a child unless the parents make it a difference. There has been no research that I have seen, and I did look into some of this, that says otherwise. If you have some, please put it in your description or cite it somewhere. But I did not see any there, nor did I see any in my extra research. So I cannot confirm or deny your statement, but the lack of studies confirming your position makes me think it's some religious held belief. That means absolutely nothing to me or anyone that holds your argument with some water, or shouldn't allow them to hold any water.
Here are 3 reasons why third party reproduction is not like adoption. First, adoption seeks to mend a family wound. Third party reproduction creates a family wound. Adoption is a necessity born of brokenness. Before a child can be adopted, they must first lose their biological family. Many adoptees describe a primal wound that their adoptive parents have helped them work through.
Now, again, I'd like to point out there were not any sources for the statistic, and all I have, especially it's not even a statistic, what she just said, um, all I have is anecdotal evidence, because again, I couldn't find anything really going either way in relating to this biological bit. But as far as I've learned from the few people that I know who are adopted, they have said that this biological wound she's speaking of, or primal need for biological family members, that's not an actual thing. Now, I mean, I'm talking to the average person, so this is just within their psyche, but it holds as much water as her argument, or maybe even more if I was able to release their names, but I can't. So yeah, I'll let her continue.
Donor conception is also born of brokenness because a child is separated from one or both parents. But in the case of donor conceived children, the parents raising them participated in creating their wound.
What wound is she talking about? Again, in any of my research, I have not seen any negative effect of surrogacy that she is describing. No wound, no other vague language that she is spouting, because where is this coming from? It doesn't make sense in my research. It doesn't fit any other information I've seen. The only thing she keeps bringing up is it separates people from biological parents. But again, biological parents doesn't necessarily mean that that parent is going to be the best parent for the child, nor does it mean that a parent that is not biologically related to a child is it going to make that parent a bad parent for the child. Biology, in the genetic sense, does not relate to this. You bringing up biological stuff every 30 seconds doesn't prove what you think it proves. And again, it's pushing to make Christians feel like surrogacy is a bad thing because it plays on their emotions and touches these little strings that they are against because of different reasons. And then the statement of the parents helped create this biological wound. They're raising a child they wanted. How is that any different than a parent wanting a child, or two parents wanting a child, doing the stuff, doing the devil's tango, whatever, and then having a kid? How is that any different than wanting a child than going and paying someone so you are able to have a child yourself? Now, I would think adoption would be a better choice so you could help save some kids, and that would be a reason that I would say adoption might be better than surrogacy. But surrogacy isn't inherently negative, nor is adoption. Now, you could say adoption is better because it helps kids who are in a bad situation where surrogacy does not have that same thing. But what you cannot say is that surrogacy is bad because it takes the kid away from one or both of their biological parents, because that's not a problem. And if it is a problem, you need to better source that information, because I could not find it anywhere. I looked on your website, I looked throughout the internet, I went through scholarly stuff, I looked for some books. Now, I didn't do that very long because I only had so much time. I am a student. But I did research, I tried, and I could not find anything. Like, I can't even put a source in the thing for where they could have gotten this information because there was nothing, which is very surprising. The internet spouts all kind of ideas, but the closest I could have found was a blog post by someone who was pro-life from like 5 years ago that wasn't relevant because it was on passing and mentioned once, and this was an overarching thing on abortion, this little nod to surrogacy. And I do not think that that is where they got this, because it wasn't a Christian source. Sorry about for that long clip. I'll let her continue.
Second, with adoption, the child is the client. But with third-party reproduction, the adult is the client. The purpose of adoption is to make sure that children have parents. Therefore, the adoption process is built around the best interest of the child. Adoptive parents undergo screenings and background checks and receive post-adoption supervision. In adoption, the adults sacrifice for the kids. The goal of third-party reproduction is to make sure adults have a child, so the process is built around the best interest of the adults. It lacks the safeguards of adoption and often separates a child from one or both biological parents. In third-party reproduction, the child sacrifices for the adult. Third, with adoption, adults support the child. With third-party reproduction, children support the adults. In both adoption and third-party reproduction, children experience loss, but adoptive parents can better support children through the loss. That's possible because adoptive parents didn't cause the trauma. However, with third-party reproduction, children are living with the adults responsible for their missing parent. Expressing their loss means condemning the decisions of the adults who are raising them. That means donor-conceived children are more likely to suppress their feelings or feel guilty for having them in the first place. So, it's the child who must be understanding and accommodating and supportive of the adults. There's no doubt that adults who want to have children through sperm and egg donation or surrogacy have good intentions. But when it comes to the rights and well-being of children, the intention of adults should not dictate policy.
So this is a little frustrating. Some more sources, some more statements that are completely unsourced, more research, again, that I could not confirm nor deny her statements because they kind of just come out of left field, in my opinion. Her statement specifically on it's the kids who have to be understanding towards the parents and not the other way around. I find that hardly true just based on my understanding of how the world works, because generally I do not think kids, from my research, have the concerns that they say in this video that kids have those concerns. I've even noticed an adoption, at least adoption with babies and younger kids, that those problems don't arise unless the parents don't tell their kids that they're adopted until later in life. Then those problems do arise in the future. But again, most of her research is unfounded. And before I turn off, if you listen to the way she's phrasing things, she'll say third-party reproduction instead of surrogate parenting or the other terms for it. And again, as I've said a couple times, these are phrases that are designed to anger and frustrate Christians because of how they go against some God thing like no sex outside of marriage. Though surrogacy is not sex, a lot of them equate it to be. It's the same kind of the same goal as the principal print what am I going sorry of saying embryo and in a lab and implanted. It's the same thing that they're pushing there. Anyway, I'll try to let her finish up. This is a shorter video and I'm already more than 14 minutes in. My apologies.
And when we have to choose between what adults want and the rights of children, we have to side with the kids. So next time someone tells you that third-party reproduction is just like adoption, here's 3 things to remember. Adoption seeks to mend a wound. Third-party reproduction creates a wound. With adoption, the child is the client. With third-party reproduction, the adult is the client. With adoption, adults support the child. With third-party reproduction, the children supports the adults. For What Would You Say? I'm Katie Faust. If you like this video, let us know below. If you want to make sure that you see the next one, hit subscribe. To help keep these videos coming and free to the whole world, chip in below.
So again, as I pointed out in those clips that I gave of audio, and this was their full video, it was there's clearly what they're trying to do is to frustrate Christians. Their target and to get Christians to join their crusades, not crusades in quotes, against surrogacy and other things they push. Like anti-abortion, anti-transgender, anti-gay, LGBT, trans, all that kind of stuff. They are phrasing stuff in ways that are designed to anger people. And then they're putting it under the guise of educating Christians on how to deal with these questions. But these things that they're pointing out aren't ways to deal with that statement. Because you can definitely argue that adoption and surrogacy are different, because they are. People who argue they're the same are wrong. But people who say that surrogacy is bad for these reasons are also wrong. Because it is no different than two people, and if you want to be, I'll go all the way there. Two married people who are married together, I'll specify that, want to have a kid, so they do the devil's tango, and they have a kid. That is the exact same as doing surrogate parenting, or having a surrogate mother, because every party involved is there for a reason. The mother is there for monetary stuff. The two people who want to have a kid are there because they want to have a kid. Everyone involved is there because they want to be there. If they weren't, it wouldn't have happened. So it's not dangerous that way. There's no increased risk of abuse so far in studies relating to surrogate families. And there's no increase of depression, mal effects, anything like that in surrogate parenting, the same way that there are limited to no negative effects of newborn adoption. So, that's my argument. Sorry for this 20 to 23 minute video. If you enjoy the long ones, I'm glad you enjoyed. I hope you guys had an amazing day. Roman Atheist, out.